What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my co-host, Alex Wilson. And today, we are recording the episode that you've all been waiting for. Alex and I are going to dive into our step-by-step blueprints to fix the New York Giants. We've had a lot of requests to do something like this, and we've been trying to figure out how to do it right. So we think we've come up with a special formula here to show you exactly what we would do if we were in the general manager chairs for the New York Giants. So we're going to go ahead and start this thing off and discuss the assets that the New York Giants have entering this offseason in terms of their projected cap space, their draft capital, their needs, their weaknesses on the roster. Have a quick discussion about that. And then I have my step-by-step plan. Alex has his. There's some overlap, but they're relatively different is what I would say. They're similar, but they're pretty different as well. So we each have our own individual vision that we'll share, and that's going to be the plan for this episode. But Alex, before we dive into all that, how are you feeling? Are you excited to go through your blueprint? And do you think that there is a world where the Giants can get the right blueprint in place and become a winning football team in 2025?
Yeah, listen, man, this is going to be really fun. Like you said, I think this is a really cool formula on how we would go about rebuilding this roster, not even roster, but team, and adding talent to it and trying to get this team in a position to win long-term, but also be competitive in 2025. The truth is the Giants are behind the eight ball. They are struggling to find pieces to make them competent. They struck out on Matthew Stafford. Now they pivot, and we're hearing lots of rumors regarding their interest in Aaron Rodgers and other quarterbacks. So we'll see how they go about finding that solution. But like you said, we have similar ideas and ways, but also different ways to get there, whether it be at receiver, quarterback, cornerback, and you have some interesting ideas. And I think that we'll have some overlapping agreements and disagreements for sure on our different strategies. But it'll be interesting to see how we go about piecing this together. And as we go along with this, guys, if you're in the YouTube comments, that is, make sure to drop your preferences too, because we love to see your ideas, your thoughts step by step. If you have the time and you want to write it out, and you want to drop a comment, even just listing names on guys you would target. We kind of dove into this with the idea of we're not just going to list names for no reason. We're going to look at the cap space. We're going to break down how we would go about restructuring contracts, the fit, for these players and guys that have experience and, maybe guys on the upswing, maybe veterans that are cheaper alternatives to others. We went about this in a way that was a blend of everything and acknowledging that we do have draft capital. We do have money in the future that we want to structure these contracts to also cap, a lot of this money is going to be kicked into 2026 is what we're saying, because the reality is the Giants have 47 mil, 37 really after the draft pick. So it's really not that much money to work with all the needs. 2026, 27, that money is going to have to be spent now. That's kind of what Joe Schoen has set this up for, that money. And it's partially why I was like, I don't know if John Mara should keep these guys in charge, because they set the cap up for these 2 years and now they're going to spend like madmen to save themselves. And if they end up getting fired, another regime is going to step in and have a lot of money on the books and then reset all over again. So that's kind of why we were a little bit suspect about the whole, keeping them in their place in the first place. However, let's kind of take a look at what the future might look like from our perspectives, and let's see if maybe the Giants follow our blueprint at all.
Right, exactly. So essentially, we're the new regime stepping in this simulation that we're going to be going through. But let's talk about these assets at first. You mentioned the salary cap space. To clarify, according to Over the Cap, the New York Giants currently have $46.8 million in salary cap space. Now, the number is $1 million higher on the graphic on the screen, but that is because the Giants today re-signed Tommy DeVito to an exclusive free agent contract. So that's worth noting. But essentially, the number that you want to look at here, Alex, is effective cap space. And for Giants fans who might not be familiar, effective cap space is defined as the cap space a team will have after signing at least 51 players and its projected rookie class to its roster. So that's the real spending power that the Giants have. They might have around $46 million in cap space, but they can't use all of that. They can only use the $38 million in effective cap space that they have. However, they do have some opportunities to create more cap space with restructurings of deals like Andrew Thomas, Brian Burns, Dexter Lawrence, and a few others. They can balloon that effective cap space by at least another $40 million if they so choose. But like you said, Alex, that's going to create more cap penalties for the future and higher cap charges for their star players down the road. But before we dive into the biggest needs, what's your take on the Giants' salary cap health, Alex? Because honestly, I think I have a pretty decent understanding of the salary cap, but yours is better. Like, I'm always impressed with your salary cap knowledge. So give a quick breakdown on the Giants year-by-year salary cap health. Obviously, like I said, the $38 million this offseason, but over the next few years, they have a lot of cap space. How can they tap into that money to help themselves this offseason, like you were saying, with some of these restructurings and backloadings of these contracts?
Yeah, so the reality is the Giants don't have that much money this offseason, but with the way that the salary cap is increasing over time and the way that they've structured this kind of rebuild, they are like perfectly positioned to draft a quarterback right now because you can set yourself up to get the bridge, one and done. You have a little bit dead money next year, and we'll talk about that in our game plans. But you have an opportunity to go up and get this quarterback and set yourself up for not only lots of years of healthy salary cap manipulation, but expanded cap. The cap's going to keep increasing, and that allows you to spend and build around this offensive talent, this offensive core you've built with, whether it be Cam Ward, or Sanders, Jackson Dart, whoever it might be. You have neighbors. You got Theo Johnson, you got Tyrone Tracy. You have so many guys already locked in on rookie contracts right now. Now is the time to get that quarterback and start building that foundation and core. Like, of course, yeah, it's not the best quarterback class that people, have ever seen. And a lot of people will say it's not worth even moving up to get one of these guys. But the Giants, like, they tend to waste a lot of time trying to get where they need to be. And they try to push it over a year, push it in the future, do this, wait to get a quarterback. They gotta strike while the iron's hot, man. Like, the iron is hot. The cap is healthy right now. They need to set themselves up for long-term success and sustainability. And the way to do that is to get a rookie quarterback on a rookie contract. So, right now, this year, they have $46.8 million at their disposal. That money is going to disappear like that. And the reason for that is because, well, 10 mil for the draft class. And then if you go and get a quarterback, a starting level guy like a Darnold, like a Rodgers, like a Russ, it's going to be a 1 year, 30 mil deal. All of a sudden, you have no money. Just like that. Just like that. Magic, no money. So what the Giants do in that instance is they push it into the future and they say, well, let's sign Aaron Rodgers to a 1 year, $30 million deal. However, we can create a void year in 2026 or push that dead cap hit, cut it in half, 15 mil this year, 15 mil next year. So that way they can pay a little bit of the bill next year, but they can still get the player at a cheaper cost this year. So that's kind of a way that they can go about helping themselves now. The alternative to that, and I think they're going to do both. They're going to push money into the future, and they're going to do what I'm about to say. They're going to restructure contracts. If they restructure Dexter Lawrence, they restructure Andrew Thomas, they can open up a maximum of $22 million. They also have Brian Burns at their disposal. I think it's about $16 million. So they have a lot of money if they restructure some deals that they can. Essentially what happens is they take that 16 mil, Brian Burns has 4 more years left on his deal. They take that amount and they just spread it out. They divide it by 4 and they allocate that dead money over the next 4 years. Or they can do something different. They could take it all on next year, but usually they'll spread it out over the course of the rest of the contract with the restructure. That way they can free up cap space every year. And it's kind of just a smaller amount that they can deal with every season. So that's how the Giants will likely go about fixing any problems they run into with a need for cash, a need for financial flexibility right now, taking that money, spreading it out over the course of the duration of the contract and clearing up cap space that way. So yes, they have a lot of money next year on the books. Technically, they have $146.4 million. That's Daniel Jones coming off the books at 20 mil. They have some guys they have to make decisions on. Obviously you look at guys like Kayvon Thibodeau, $14 million on the 5th-year option, if they do extend him on that. So you already have to deal with that equation, that variable in the equation. You're going to get a quarterback. You have to push some dead money into the future. You're going to restructure some contracts. That puts some money into the future. You have next year's draft class. All of a sudden that 146 mil starts to go down really freaking fast. However, I'm not concerned about 2026. And the reason for that is because if you have a rookie contract under contract for the next 5-6 years, and then you can create you look at the Eagles just did. They create void years. They extend their rookie quarterback early to get ahead of the expanding cap space. And they create void years into the future to open up this window, which allows it to spend $20 million per season on Saquon Barkley and signing Zach Bond to $14 million a year. So that's how good teams go about structuring future contracts. I don't care about 2026. 2027, 2028, those are the years where the Giants are going to have a nice core of talent still on the books, lots of rookies, lots of young talent, and have a stupendous amount of money to spend on upgrading. And if they get the quarterback right, and Cam Ward, in my opinion, is the guy, and we'll talk about that in our plans, obviously, hint, hint. We'll suppress that for a second, but the truth of the matter is, if Cam Ward pans out, not only do you have a basically unlimited checkbook to go and sign whoever you want, but you get to keep your own talent when they hit free agency. You get to keep your own guys and extend them. And, you also are an attractive destination because people want to play with a winning quarterback. They want to play in New York. We just don't have anything worth a damn just yet. And obviously they're going to get paid a large sum of money at the same time. So that's kind of how the Giants can set themselves up for long-term success. With that being said, I don't want to overspend on mid players in this free agency class. So I tried to find a good balance, and Anthony as well, on talent that was affordable, that didn't feel like we had to pay a premium on because they're not that good and they could regress, or they may not have done that as much on other teams. So we try to find a good balance of like, this is a good situation where we can be competitive now and some good veteran experienced talent, even some younger guys too, while setting ourselves up for future success and future cap space to work with.
Absolutely. So I'll just say, to your point of using some of that future cap space, think of it as using a loan, basically. You're just going to take some of that money from the future, use it now, and obviously you're going to have to pay it off at some point. That's what the Giants are going to do with these restructurings and other things that we mentioned. So Alex, where's that money going to go is a big question. And the way that I break it down, I think there's 3 tiers of needs for the New York Giants on their roster. And that first tier is quarterback and cornerback. I think first and foremost, as soon as free agency opens up, that's where the Giants money needs to go. They have to upgrade with a veteran quarterback to elevate the floor of this team, and they have to get themselves an experienced cornerback to help their young and inexperienced secondary start to blossom. And then if you're looking at that second tier of talent that the Giants need to address, I think that's where you look at the offensive and defensive line. Obviously, everybody says build through the trenches, and you want to invest in the trenches immediately if you can, but quarterback is so important for this team. So that's in that first tier. Cornerback also in that first tier, because that's been a problem for the Giants. And honestly, I think their offensive line has a couple of pieces. They just need those guys to develop, and they need to supplement those pieces with additional talent around them. Same thing for the defensive line. And then in that tier 3 for me, Alex, is wide receiver and safety. Again, the skill positions, I think you lower a little bit behind quarterback, obviously, and trenches. Wide receiver and safety, though, still sneaky needs for the Giants. How do you view these needs for the Giants? Obviously, as we always say, they have needs just about everywhere. But, when you're looking at them in these buckets and looking at the importance of certain positions, how are you feeling with these big needs that the Giants have to address this offseason?
Well, I'm going to try to, find a middle balance here between I think the Giants team, what Joe Shane really needs to save his job. And the truth is that quarterback, he has to get a good quarterback. He has to sign a 1-year solid veteran bridge that's going to sling the rock better than we've seen in the last 6-7 seasons and keep this team in at least in the hunt, at least competitive. It's going to be tough to be competitive in the NFC East this upcoming season and in the future in general. So they got to get a quarterback that can at least throw the ball, get it there on time, accurately, and have some anticipation. So quarterback and, that consistency, and Dable said it how many times verbatim, we need more consistency at quarterback. They're going to have to go in the direction of finding a veteran that can help them in that regard. Next on the list, you could say receiver, you could say cornerback. I personally think cornerback is probably number 2. And the reason for that is, look, if the Giants stop teams from running the football and they get better in that area, teams are going to throw all over us if we don't have another cornerback to help this defense. So I think they need to throw it back at somebody. I don't know who it's going to be. They have DJ Reed, Travarius Ward, obviously Byron Murphy, a couple guys in free agency they can definitely consider. But cornerback has to be upgraded because Deonte Banks, as much as I think he has all the talent in the world, needs someone to lead the charge there. He cannot be the leader of that cornerback room. The lack of confidence, we've seen laziness from him on the field. That stuff, you can't do those things in the professional football league. You need to have a veteran leader that demands much better from each other and from him specifically, like Xavier McKinney did in 2023, demanded that Deonte Banks played well, and they were good friends. And then they let McKinney walk, and Deonte Banks had no one there that he really looked up to and felt was a leader, and he cratered. That's kind of how I view this free agency, is they need to find a rock in that secondary. Tyler Newman, I like him. He's just too young. Andrew Phillips, I like him, just too young. Same with Banks. They have no leadership in that secondary. They need a veteran who's going to step in and demand better performance and lead the charge and be that guy. So, I do think that's a key component. Next on the list, I think right guard. If you're going to go and get a quarterback like a Rodgers, like a Darnold, whoever, and you're going to draft somebody, you got to get a right guard who's going to be here for a couple seasons that can grow alongside, these players. So that chemistry, I think that's kind of the biggest problem with the Giants. Sometimes they sign guys, they cut them too fast. They don't make good evaluations, and then they draft guys and they give up on them too fast, and then or they get hurt. And when you have incompetence, more injuries arise. We've seen that many times in the past. The truth is that being healthy and being consistent and playing all the time, and committing to the process and having consistent coaches and not turnover every season, that leads to success. The Eagles are good because they have consistency across the board. Obviously they have good talent too, but they go and get other pieces and they insert them into a position where everything's going to be structured and there's a process in place and everyone knows the process and everyone's on the same page. The Giants, nobody knows the process. Nobody's on the same page. They're turning over coaches every year. That cannot happen. That has to stop. They have to find good coaches and keep those coaches, right? So on the offensive line, as fun as it is to get one and done players, they need to get a guy that has some youth and some upside and some longevity and can build and be a cemented piece within this equation, in my opinion. So I think right guard is definitely up there as well. Receiver, you need to have a competent piece next to Neighbors. You can no longer lean on Neighbors to be this guy that's going to get fed the rock every other passing attempt. It is unsustainable. He is going to get hurt. He got multiple concussions this past season. These things cannot keep continuing on, and the Giants feeling as though they are in a good place. They have to get a solid WR2 who's going to be a good security blanket for whoever's playing quarterback, is an experienced player, and is going to be a great mentor for the young guys in that room. And I do think the Giants should be taking shots in the mid-rounds on receivers all the time, because those guys, Darius Slayton is a great example of someone that well outplayed his draft selection. So they need to be taking shots at guys with upside, in my opinion. Now, of course, we prefer BPA. I do think that naturally receiver, there's some good BPA options in the mid rounds that they can target. So, receivers definitely up there as well. Defensive tackles, another spot. I think they will address that in the draft personally, because of how deep this class is. Strong safety is another one to throw into the mix. Like, they got a lot of needs, man. Like, a lot of needs. They have the resources to address them, but they got to hit on these players. They cannot sit around and wait like they did last year for guys to shake free. We begged them to get a cornerback. They waited too long. They ended up signing what's his name? Adoree Jackson to support this secondary, and it did not pan out. They ended up going and getting Drew Lock in the last second after missing out on all the quarterbacks to compete with Daniel Jones. They have to be aggressive and go get guys who are going to make this team better instead of waiting and thinking they can outsmart the free agency class and free agency process. They think they're smarter than the process. And that is the problem with the Giants at times. They need to be aggressive and go get guys that make their team better and stop waiting to see who shakes free. You know what I mean? Like, that's not how good teams build. They go and they make decisive decisions and they are proactive, right? Not reactive. So that's kind of how I see the kind of system of how the needs of this team need to be addressed in free agency. But, a lot needs to happen, obviously, over the next couple of weeks, especially this upcoming week when things get kicked off.
Yeah, literally on Monday. So that's why we're getting this done now. It's Thursday when we're recording this, trying to get it out before the weekend, because we know that a trade or something could shake up the entirety of the NFL within the next 24 hours. That's how it's going to go over the course of this weekend. So before we dive into my blueprint, I just want to lay out the final major asset that the New York Giants have, Alex, and that is their 2025 draft capital. This year, of course, they hold the number 3 overall pick in the draft. They also hold pick number 34, which is their second round selection, and pick number 65, which is their third round selection. They have 2 fourth-round picks at 103 and 134. The 134 selection being a compensation pick that they get from Xavier McKinney signing with the Green Bay Packers last offseason. They have a 5th-round pick that they received from the Seattle Seahawks in the Leonard Williams trade, and 2 7th-round draft picks. That's what the New York Giants have at their disposal this offseason in draft capital, and that gives them plenty of opportunity to build out their roster long-term, while also giving them plenty of opportunities to make some trades, which, of course, I know, Alex, you and I are both going to do within our individual step-by-step blueprints. So pretty good comprehensive breakdown of all the assets that the Giants have here. Again, Alex always bringing the great insight on the salary cap space, as he always does so well, and me just giving my opinions here and there on everything that he has to say. But I'll go ahead and now and waste no more time and move into my step-by-step breakdown to rebuild the New York Giants. All right, so now that I'm in the general manager chair, the first thing that I'm going to do here as GM of the New York Giants to kick off the 2025 offseason, well, I want to free up a little bit more salary cap space for myself. We've only got $38 million in effective cap space. And honestly, with the needs that we have and the amount of work that we have to do on this roster, that's not going to be enough money for me or for the Giants, the guys who are actually making these decisions. So the first thing that I'm going to do is max restructure Brian Burns' contract. That's going to free up $16 million in cap space for me. The next thing that I'm going to do, and I think this is interesting, I want to hear your guys' thoughts on this down below. I'm going to extend linebacker Micah McFadden on a 4-year contract worth about $8 million per season. That seems to be about his market value. And hear me out on this. $8 million per season for a starting linebacker, which is what Micah McFadden is kind of a bargain. Plus, if you wait another year to extend McFadden, say you let him play out this 2025 season, well, if he goes for another 120 combined tackles, his price tag might exceed $10 million for sure. So I want to get this contract offer out there and get this deal done sooner rather than later, lock him in, make sure that I don't overpay for him down the line. And by doing so, I free up another $1.8 million in cap space for myself for this 2025 offseason. So after restructuring Brian Burns, after locking in Micah McFadden long-term, now I have $56 million in salary cap space to work with. And the first signing that I'm going to make is quarterback Russell Wilson. And I'm going to sign him to a 1-year, $30 million contract with a cap hit of $25 million in 2025. So it's not a fully guaranteed contract. Obviously not. I don't want to fully guarantee anything to Russell Wilson. For what it's worth, I considered making this a 2-year deal, but I figured once you see the rest of my plan, you'll know that I have other things in the works here that I plan on doing for the upcoming draft at quarterback. I think that Russell Wilson works as a good bridge for the New York Giants. He's only 36 years old, which, yes, is older, but it's not as old as an Aaron Rodgers. And as a result, I think he comes with less risk than Aaron Rodgers does. And the thing is, with Russell Wilson, I feel like he elevates your floor in a way where you know you're going to maximize Malik Nabers much better than you did, and you're going to be able to run a far more functioning offense than you have over the last 2 seasons. Last season, he played 11 games, started 11 games for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He had a 16-5 touchdown to interception ratio with nearly 2,500 passing yards. If you compare that to the fact that the Giants barely scraped 3,000 total passing yards and had a 15-13 touchdown to interception ratio in 17 games among their 4 quarterbacks, well, I think you can see overnight the New York Giants are a significantly better team if they sign Russell Wilson. He's going to be able to get the ball in the hands of Malik Nabers. He's going to be able to run a decent offense. And I do think that he's worth that market value of about a 1-year, $30 million contract. He would be the perfect bridge quarterback in my mind. I think he elevates your floor and your ceiling, and he doesn't get in the way of you potentially drafting a quarterback in the upcoming NFL draft in April. So now that I have my bridge quarterback in there, like I said, it's only a 1-year deal, so I got to do something for the future. And that's where I'm going to go ahead and make a trade for the number 1 overall pick in the NFL draft. In my mock trade here, I have the Giants trading pick number 1 overall, pick number 3 overall, pick number 65 overall, which is their 3rd round draft pick in 2025, and their 2026 2nd round draft pick. Now, obviously, there's been a lot of reporting on this. The projected price tag sounds like it's going to be 2 top 100 picks. And for me, I would rather give up a 2nd round next year where I have some time to recalibrate than this year where I really need to add some talent in the building as soon as possible. I think a deal like that would get it done. The Titans are incentivized to stay inside the top 3 picks so that they can land one of Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders if they want him, of course, Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter. They're not going to want to go further down than the 3rd overall pick. My fear here is that the Cleveland Browns could actually snipe us, move up a 1 spot into the 1st overall pick for Cam Ward. But I think throwing in that 2nd round draft pick would be enough to incentivize the Titans to move down. So that's going to be where we start here. Now we've got Russell Wilson as our bridge, and we're positioned to pick 1st overall in April's draft. That's how we're fixing the quarterback position. Now let's move on and address some of these other big needs that the New York Giants have. So the next big free agent signing that I'm going to make is cornerback DJ Reed of the New York Jets, and I'm going to be signing him to a 3-year, $50 million contract with a $12 million cap hit in 2025. So obviously, I'm backloading this contract in order to give myself a little bit more spending power this offseason. Yeah, he's going to have some pretty high cap charges over the next several years in 26, 27, 28, but I need to make sure that I upgrade this cornerback room right now and the rest of this roster. So I'm going to backload this deal and sign DJ Reed. DJ Reed makes the most sense to me out of all the cornerbacks. in free agency this offseason because he's a very good player, a legitimate CB1, and he's also a great mentor. Ahmad Sauce Gardner from the New York Jets credits DJ Reed with being a mentor. He says that he matured in the NFL because of DJ Reed. And I think that if you're able to sign a player like that who can be a shutdown cornerback one for you and help Deonte Banks grow as a player, you're killing two birds with one stone. I also think that this is very likely to happen because the New York Giants hired Marquand Manuel, who was the safeties coach of the New York Jets this past season. Obviously, he knows DJ Reed. I think that connection can help us sign him in free agency. I think DJ Reed probably doesn't want to leave New York. He's had a good career here so far, just doesn't really like the Jets. The Jets are a bad team, but the Giants, I think, are going to have to be willing to overpay at this position. I'm paying above market value for DJ Reed in this projected contract, but that's to ensure that I lock down a CB1 because that is a desperate need for the New York Giants. So DJ Reed is my big splash signing in tier 1 to address those two needs: quarterback Russell Wilson, cornerback DJ Reed. Now I feel as though we've solved the Giants' two biggest needs in free agency. Next, we're going to move into tier 2 of the Giants' needs, and we're going to address the trenches. And first and foremost, we're going to upgrade the offensive line. Like Alex and I were saying, the Giants have a major need at right guard. They need to go ahead and bring somebody in here to basically start that position all 17 games. And it's a thin market. However, the Chicago Bears just made two moves on their offensive line. They traded for Joe Thuney and they traded for Jonah Jackson. I think those two guys could start for them at left and right guard, respectively, this upcoming season. And that's why I think their offensive guard free agent, Tevin Jenkins, is very likely to walk in free agency. So that's going to be my big splash signing on the offensive line. I'm going to sign Tevin Jenkins to a 3-year, $40 million contract with a $10 million cap hit in 2025. So once again, backloading this deal, making sure that I still have some money to spend this offseason, but also upgrading at now 3 major positions of need with a quarterback, a cornerback, and a starting right guard. What I really like about Tevin Jenkins, first of all, he's very technically sound. When he's healthy, he's among the top offensive linemen in the NFL, legitimately. And he's got positional versatility. He's been dominant at left guard. He's been dominant at right guard. The only thing standing in his way is health. But I do have a solution for that. We're going to add depth on the offensive line in the 3rd tier of free agency. I'll get there in a moment. But I really want to sell you guys on Tevin Jenkins because I think he's a player who does make a lot of sense for the Giants. He's only 27 years old. Again, he's got versatility to play on both sides of the line, and so does John Runyon Jr. John Runyon Jr. can play left guard and right guard. So can Tevin Jenkins. So essentially, I think you get these two positionless guards in here, and you just figure it out. Whoever wants to play whichever. And once you're through training camp and you decide which one's a bigger need, whatever, you just find out where these guys are going to play best, and you just get the best possible offensive lineman that you can in the building. And I think Tevin Jenkins, pound for pound, talent-wise, is among the best guards in the league when he's healthy. Just stay healthy, and I think we've got a really good offensive line here now cooking up with Runyon on the left or the right, Jenkins on the left or the right, of course, Andrew Thomas, Jermaine Illuminor going to hold on to him, and hopefully John Michael Schmitz takes a step forward. But I do think that this is a realistic upgrade that the Giants can make this offseason. So that's why I'm going to go ahead and lock that in my simulation, 3-year, $40 million deal. All right, now covering the other half of the trenches on the defensive line. Dexter Lawrence is the anchor in the middle of the Giants defense, and he truly is one of the best players in all of football. He's healthy now. Obviously, he was out for the majority of the season with that elbow injury, but he did compete in the tug of war at the Pro Bowl, so I think his elbow is feeling fine. We're going to continue to assume that he's going to be here, but we also need to bring in another defensive lineman to pair alongside him, because last year, the Giants had a revolving door at DT2. They had Elijah Chapman come in, DJ Davidson, Rakeem Nunez-Roches. None of those guys really cut it. So I'm going to look to the veteran market once again, bring in some experience here. Giants had a lot of inexperience with those younger guys competing for that position. I like Jaron Reed from the Seattle Seahawks. He's 32 years old. He's a quality run defender, but he has a lot of pass rushing upside. And I think this Giants team really needs to have more down-to-down, one-on-one pass rush winners, especially on the interior. I feel like oftentimes over the last 2 years, they've only won on blitzes. They need more legitimate and pure pass rushers. And I think Jaron Reed provides that upside. So I'm going to sign him to a 1-year, $6 million deal with a $5 million cap hit. So not a fully guaranteed contract, but a 1-year deal because he is a veteran and he is 32 years old. But I do think he can provide some immediate impact on the defensive line for the New York Giants, playing from the interior as a high-quality pass rusher, plus a decent run stopper or a stopper as well. So Jaron Reed is going to be my signing on the defensive line. And then the last trenches upgrade that I have is offensive lineman Patrick McCarry from the Baltimore Ravens. Now, this is a guy that Alex actually circled and pointed out to me several weeks ago, actually maybe 2 months ago now at this point, as a guy who makes so much sense for the Giants. I'm signing him to a 1-year, $7 million deal with a $5 million cap hit, and I'm definitely overpaying for Patrick McCarry with this contract, but it's because of the amount of the injuries that the New York Giants had on their offensive line last year. And the thing about McCarry, he can step in at any position. He has significant snaps played at a high level at right tackle, right guard, center, left guard, and left tackle. He's played all 5 positions on the offensive line, and the Giants need a guy like that. Someone who, when they've got an injury, can step in and give them some quality snaps. That's why I think it's worth it overpaying a little bit for Patrick McCarry. I'm not even going to call him a guard or a tackle, whatever. He's just offensive lineman, Patrick McCarry, for a 1-year, $7 million deal. Like I said, overpaying a little bit. However, I do think it's a necessary overpay in order to ensure that what happened to the Giants last year does not happen again. So now after making these signings of Russell Wilson, DJ Reed, Tevin Jenkins, and Jaron Reed, and Patrick McCarry, we've used up a lot of the cap space. Those 5 signings are $57 million in 2025 cap space, leaving us with $7 million left to spend. So I'm going to go ahead and restructure now Andrew Thomas's contract. That's going to free up another $12.5 million in cap space, giving us about $20 million in total cap space, but that's only $12.2 million in effective cap space. So I'm going to have to also restructure Dexter Lawrence. And again, these are risky moves because you're pushing money down the line. But again, the Giants have a lot of cap space in 2026. But restructuring Dexter Lawrence will free up another $9.8 million. So now we have $22 million in effective cap space to spend, which is very crucial. And we're going to have to use that money wisely as we make a couple more signings here in free agency. And again, I caution against restructuring contracts typically, but for the Giants, they do have a ton of cap space in the future, a projected $121 million in 2026 and $169 million in 2027. And with the way that the salary cap keeps going up every year, they're probably going to have even more money when it's all said and done. Now, obviously, if I'm restructuring these deals, we're going to take away a little bit of that cap space in both of those subsequent off seasons. But the Giants don't have a lot of players due for extensions coming up because they haven't drafted too well. So you could feel comfortable pushing some of that money down the line in order to put a better product on the field this year. So that's what I'm going to do. Going to go ahead and make those restructurings. Now we have $22 million in effective cap space to round out our free agency pool. And with that final $22 million in effective cap space, the first deal that I'm going to make is safety Julian Blackmon from the Indianapolis Colts. He's a rangy player. He usually plays in the deep safety role. And last year, they had Tyler Nubin kind of playing in multiple positions for the Giants defense. But realistically, I think where he fits best is actually in the box. He's not the most athletic guy, and most of the big plays that he made last year were in run support while playing in the box as more of a strong safety. So I'm going to go ahead and bring in Julian Blackmon because I think he can play that free safety role as that deep, rangy ball hawk better and be a little bit of an upgrade at that position. I'm going to sign him to a 3-year, $20 million contract. So it's going to be close to $7 million per season. But again, backloading it, taking some of that money from the future and handing it off. And it's going to be a $3.5 million cap hit for Julian Blackmon this season. Real low, keep it tight, and make sure that we upgrade the secondary. We got DJ Reed. We also now have Julian Blackmon. I think that we're building a pretty solid secondary here with those 2 signings. And then the last signing that I'm going to make is wide receiver Mike Williams. Honestly, I wish that I had more money in my budget to bring in a more premier playmaker, but the way that I built this thing and the needs that I felt were more important to the Giants that I had to address, I ran out of money. So Mike Williams is going to be my wide receiver signing on a 1-year, $6 million deal with a $4 million cap hit. I think Mike Williams is still a decent player. He's really more of a wide receiver 3 at this point in his career. We're going to be calling upon a Wan'Dale Robinson to really step up in this offense now. But I do think that with Russell Wilson at the helm, commanding the offense, we'll be able to get the ball to Malik Neighbors more effectively, and we'll be able to spread the ball out to the playmakers like a Mike Williams, who he just played with in Pittsburgh this past season, Wan'Dale Robinson, and hopefully we can get Jalen Hyatt to develop and become a good player this season as well. But Mike Williams, I think, is going to come real cheap, but I still think he's an effective player, especially as a deep threat to stretch through the offense and the defense vertically. He's not exactly the same caliber player of Darius Slayton, who I project is walking in free agency, but he can do similar things and fit in similarly in Brian Dable's offense. the way that Darius Slayton played. So again, I didn't really prioritize wide receiver in this projection. I thought that guard, corner, quarterback, and defensive line were more important. But I think making a low-key veteran signing here with Mike Williams, a guy who just played with Russell Wilson, who we just signed, makes a lot of sense for us. So that's going to be my wide receiver upgrade, 1 year, $6 million deal for Mike Williams. Now, factoring in those last two deals, we have about $14.5 million in effective cap space entering the NFL draft, which is not a lot of money, but it's enough to get a draft class done. And there are a lot of other ways that the Giants can create cap space following this draft period. So that's enough money, again, to get these guys under the books through the NFL draft, and we'll figure out the other cap problems afterwards. Any re-signings, anything else, figure out after the draft. But I thought it was important to get a big haul of free agents in here first and foremost. But now let's go ahead and move on to the NFL draft period. So now I'm going to go through and do my 7-round mock draft, which I'm really excited about. This is going to change as we get closer to the draft, but for now, this is my projection. Reminder, I traded up to the number 1 overall pick here, and with the first overall pick in the 2025 NFL draft, the New York Giants select Miami quarterback Cam Ward. As you all know, if you've been watching the channel for a while, if you've been watching since last year, I've been a big Cam Ward fan for a very long time. When he was playing at Washington State and he initially declared for the draft the last offseason, I thought he was a tremendous prospect. He was pretty much exactly what I wanted for the New York Giants in the middle rounds of the draft of last year. Instead, he decided to go back to school, transfer to Miami, and now he's going to be the number 1 overall pick in this year's draft if I have a say in it. So I'm going to trade up for him. I think he's got innate pocket presence. I think he's a gunslinger with the mentality of throwing the football downfield. I think he's accurate. He's unpolished and he's risky, but that's exactly what the Giants need as a quarterback with a high ceiling to sit behind the Russell Wilson for a year and eventually take over as the New York Giants' long-term franchise quarterback. I love the game that Cam Ward brings to the table. I think he's got limitless potential, and that's what you want out of a number 1 overall pick. Yes, you can make the hard argument for a higher floor prospect at quarterback like Shedeur Sanders or at another position like Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter, but I'm going for a ceiling with the number 1 overall pick, and that's why I'm going to go ahead and take Miami quarterback Cam Ward first overall in this mock draft. Now, because we thankfully kept the 2nd round draft choice that we had in that mock trade, we're going to go ahead and use pick number 35 overall on Ohio State defensive tackle Tyleik Williams. I really like Tyleik Williams. I think that he is just a freak athlete for a guy his size. He's 6'3", 334 pounds. And this guy is a run stopper. So we didn't do a ton to address the defensive line in free agency. Just brought in Jarran Reed as a veteran kind of stopgap at that position, give you some experience and some reliability. But I think Tyleik Williams can step in and play on day one. Ohio State product, so you know he's played a lot of good competition. Go watch some of his film against Michigan. Guy was tearing it up. You can't run against this guy. At least you couldn't in college. So I really like Tyleik Williams. I think he's a player who fits perfectly with what the Giants need and what they want to do defensively. He's going to be my selection here with the 34th overall pick in the 2025 NFL Draft, taking Ohio State defensive tackle Tyleik Williams. Now, since we sacrificed our 3rd round pick in that trade for our franchise quarterback, Cam Ward, we're going to go ahead and jump to the 4th round of the draft where we're going to use pick number 104 on Kansas cornerback Kobe Bryant. Cool name. Swish, all that, of course, living like Kobe. Kobe Bryant here is a player that the Giants met with in the 2025 NFL Scouting Combine. And he's a player who I think makes a lot of sense for them because he's got great ball skills. Now, obviously, you can make an argument, well, we just spent a lot of money at cornerback. Why am I taking Kobe Bryant here? Well, I'm in the chair, and as you all know, I believe in the best player available strategy. I'm going to go ahead and take the best guy on the board whenever I can, regardless of our position need. And I feel as though we can't stop upgrading at cornerback, even if we bring in DJ Reed, because we're still just one injury away, one player getting cut away from having a real bad problem at cornerback. And I can't bank on these young guys that we have to continue to progress when we've really struggled to develop young talent in recent years. So I like Kobe Bryant. He had 13 interceptions and 22 pass defenses in 4 seasons in college. He's not the best athlete. He ran a 4.53 40-yard dash, which isn't too great. However, he's really competitive and physical, has great ball tracking skills, gets his hands on the football, which I think is important considering the struggles that Deonte Banks has had doing that. And he's really good in zone coverage. And I think this Giants defense is really positioned to play more zone coverage defense in 2025 with the personnel that they have. And then Kobe Bryant fits that perfectly. So that's going to be my selection here with the first 4th round selection that the New York Giants have. And with the second fourth round pick that the Giants have at number 134, I'm going to take a very boom or bust prospect here. That's UNC offensive lineman Willie Lampkin. I called him an offensive lineman because we don't know what position he's going to play at the next level. Here's the thing. Willie Lampkin is a beast. You turn on his tape at UNC and you watch him absolutely demolish defensive linemen. He is one of the best run blockers in this draft class. In fact, Lance Zierlein of NFL.com said he has the best run blocking tape of any offensive lineman this entire season in college football. However, he's 5'10", 270 pounds. He's very undersized for the position. But strangely enough, his 32-inch arms and his wingspan are larger than that of the top offensive tackle in this draft class, Will Campbell. So he's a little bit short and he's a little bit underweight, but he's got the longest arms. He's got longer arms than what's necessary for his position. He's a very weird profile. Again, I don't know if this is a guy that the Giants would realistically consider taking, but I believe in film. And the fact that this guy's film is so good, if you go ahead, you search him on Twitter, you go ahead wherever you get your film, and you watch some Willie Lampkin, you can be like, oh my God, this guy is a mauler. Even though he's undersized, it doesn't matter. He just throws people around. He's so technically sound. He is such a good run blocker. So I would personally take a chance on this guy. Yes, we're going to have to pack some pounds on him. He's only 270 pounds. I don't know if he's going to play guard at the next level. He might be a center. He might be a fullback even. But I just think get the best football players possible in here. Willie Lampkin just being a damn good football player makes him an intriguing prospect for me, makes him worthwhile throwing a dart at the board in the fourth round of this year's draft. So I'm going to go ahead and take UNC guard Willie Lampkin, and hopefully he pans out at guard. And if he doesn't, I'm going to just find a place for him because I think he's a talented football player with a very weird profile, but very good film as a run blocker. So I'm going to take a chance on him in round 4. Now, with my fifth round pick, you're once again going to see that best player available strategy take shape because I'm going to take Georgia running back Trevor Etienne. He's the brother of the Etienne that plays for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Forgetting his first name doesn't even matter, but Trevor Etienne is a really talented player coming out of Georgia. He ran a 4.42 40-yard dash at the NFL Scouting Combine. He's rapid, super fast. He's only 21 years old. He's explosive with a 10'4" broad jump, and he's got really good film. You watch some of this guy's all-22, he makes people miss. He's got great vision. He's a tackle breaker, and he's a really good receiver. Now, again, I know that the Giants drafted Tyrone Tracy last year, and Tyrone Tracy Jr. is a really good player, and they drafted him in the 5th round, and ironically, 1 year later, I'm taking another running back in the 5th round. But the reason being, this is one of the best draft classes at the running back position that the league has seen in a very long time. If I'm going best player available, ETN was the best player available on the board when I was doing this mock draft simulation, so I took him. Because I don't think that the Giants can say, hey, we've got Tyrone Tracy Jr., let's stop there. No, they need to keep adding talent to this offense and keep bringing in playmakers and build a stacked lineup of weaponry for Cam Ward / Russell Wilson. So I'm going to take Trevor Etienne, pair him with Tyrone Tracy Jr. It's not going to take Tracy off the field. Tracy's not going to prevent Trevor Etienne from being a good player for us. They're both going to be decent running backs in a system here, running back by committee style approach, because I think they play similar but differently. And I think they both bring very unique skill sets to the table, and both can be quality starting running backs for the Giants. Go look at the Detroit Lions and their 2 running back attack. That's what I'm trying to build here. So I'm taking Trevor Etienne here with my 5th round draft pick, number 155 overall. No 6th round pick for the Giants, so we're going to go ahead and tackle these 2 7th round picks in one go. First up is Alabama safety Malachi Moore. He's an interesting player, a little bit undersized, very rangy. This is a developmental prospect throwing a dart at the board at the safety / defensive back position. He has some experience playing slot and outside cornerback as well. I just like guys with versatility, especially in these late rounds, and he's a decent athlete, so I figure he could probably contribute on special teams as well, which is also my line of thinking, with my final pick of this draft, Georgia linebacker Smail Mondon. And Mondon is an athletic player. He's physical, and I think he's a good developmental piece on the back end of the Giants defense and a probably immediate contributor on special teams because of his athleticism from the linebacker position. So those are my final 2 picks, and to round this out, here is my full NFL draft class for the Giants. Round 1, pick 1, I'm taking Miami quarterback Cam Ward. Round 2, pick number 34 overall, Ohio State defensive tackle Tyleik Williams. In the 4th round, we took Kansas cornerback Kobe Bryant, UNC guard Willie Lampkin also in the 4th round, Georgia running back Trevor Etienne in the 5th, Malachi Moore from Alabama, the safety, and Georgia linebacker Smail Mondon out of in round 7. So that's my full 2025 NFL draft class with my 7-round mock draft. What are your thoughts on it? Let me know, but I'm pretty excited about it. But that's pretty much going to wrap things up. Like I said, with my free agency haul, I feel like we got better at quarterback, at corner, at guard, defensive line. And I think that in the draft, we really did some great things to find a future franchise quarterback. We upgraded the trenches and used the best player available strategy to just get some damn good football players on this roster, because the Giants just don't have enough good football players. So I really like the way that my rebuild went, but I'm very curious to hear all of your thoughts down below in the comment section. Let me know how you're feeling about both my free agency haul, my draft class, and the moves that I made to upgrade the New York Giants roster for 2025 and beyond.
It is Brucey's time to shine, baby. Let's dive into my blueprint for the New York Giants this offseason. How Anthony went through his, obviously very lengthy and detailed, and mine will be similar, but different players and kind of different ways that we are managing the cap here. So I'm going to try to find a balance in terms of clarifying what I think is the right thing to do for this team, but also meshing that with what Joe Schoen has to do and with recent rumors and reports that we are hearing. So a lot of this is going to have the context of what we're hearing in kind of the media right now built into it. So right off the bat, $47.8 million in pre-draft cap space. Obviously with Tommy DeVito, that brings it down $1 million. They have about $37 million available in cap space this offseason to spend in free agency. And obviously, you're going to be moving some of that money into 2026. And in 2027, obviously, some money will be paid down the road then as well. So right off the bat, I have a monster trade going up to get Cam Ward first overall. This, in my opinion, is worthwhile at this price tag. If the Giants have to give up a first-round pick from 2026 to go get Cam Ward at 1 overall, I'm not doing it. First-round picks are off the table for me. Even though I like Cam Ward a lot, we're only at pick 3. I think you just stay put, go BPA in that instance. If the Giants like Shedeur Sanders, that could do that as well. I would go with the Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter if that kind of unfolded. But in this instance, in my preference, the Giants trade the 3rd overall pick, 2025 3rd-round pick, 2026 2nd-round pick, and they move Bobby Okereke on his final year of his deal in the process. Now, I don't want to move Bobby Okereke. Let me make that very clear. But the Giants seemingly, people in that room, according to Pat Leonard, now I don't know if that's true, they think that he should be gone. They don't like his scheme fit. I like Bobby Okereke. I would not be looking to trade him, but because of the rumors we're hearing, I'm building that into my equation just because I think that there is some salary kind of differences and there's ways they're trying to move some salary to open up more for other players in this process. Now, because the Giants aren't giving up a ton of future first-round pick, the Titans basically cornered them into saying, you have to take Harold Landry. And the Giants are like, well, damn, that sucks. However, we're not trading Kayvon Thibodeau. We add Harold Landry to this equation, and we have a really solid pass rush where we can utilize all of these guys. Now, Harold Landry has $24 million cap hit in 2025 and in 2026. He's easily cuttable, though, after this upcoming season. He has very little dead money in 2026, so they can always move on from him if need be, and they don't want to pay the $24 million cap hit. So, Okereke, he has $10.9 million in salary this year. They offload that with the $24 million that they are adding from Harold Landry's contract. That leaves $13.1 million that hits the salary at the end of the day. Now, the operating cap for the Giants is $23.9 million. So let's talk about some players that are now going to be cut because I think that they are going to have to make some moves in this regard. They're going to cut Raheem Nunez-Roche. They're going to save $3.6 million there. They're going to cut Graham Gano, $3.4 million there, and Josh Ezeudu, $1.4. Now, Ezeudu, I don't really see how he makes this team. He's been so bad all these years up to this point. Good guy, not a good football player. Graham Gano, just injury prone. Can't rely on him anymore. We've been trying to find kickers every single season with this guy, so I think it's best to just move on, save the money, turn the page. Now the Giants have $32.3 million in available cap space after these cuts. Now, the first free agent move I'm making, and based on rumors, based on stuff we're hearing in the media, I'm signing Aaron Rodgers to a 1-year, $30 million fully guaranteed contract. I'm spreading that money out a little bit strategically. I'm $15 million in 2025 and $15 million in 2026. So we pay a little bit of the bill next year, but because we have so much money in the future, it's a drop in the bucket. It doesn't even matter. Aaron Rodgers is a polarizing variable in everyone's mind. Yes, off the field, he does ayahuasca and he goes to Egypt and he does all this crazy stuff. But I'm not asking Rodgers to save the Giants, guys. I'm asking Rodgers to be a competent player and a veteran, experienced future Hall of Famer for 1 year in a system that is going to be a lot better for him than the one he played in with the Jets this past year under the leadership of Nathaniel Hackett at offensive coordinator. It cannot happen, right? He's not going to bring Hackett with him. Dable's calling plays. I actually like the mesh of Rodgers and Dable. And 1 year, $30 million is enough to keep him here and outbid other teams, but also give a young player like Cam Ward a chance to watch and learn the tendencies of a player that's going to be in the Hall of Fame one day. Look, I think that mentorship is a little bit overrated, but there's something to do with process and cadences and learning an offense and going through your progressions and watching how a player operates on the field, the leadership qualities. Like, these are types of things that you do watch and you can take the best and leave the rest type of situation. I think Cam can gain a lot from watching Aaron Rodgers, even if it's not necessarily a mentorship. So now that we've signed Rodgers, we have $17.3 million in cap space. This is where I'll probably lose some people. And I think the reason I had a couple of different players in this, I had Devontae Adams first in here, but the reason I'm trying to get realistic, and Devontae Adams wants to go to the West Coast and he wants to go to a winning football team. The Giants are neither of those things. So in this instance, I go for the next best option in the veteran pool of guys that are still good and can offer value. And I'm really looking for mentorship with this guy specifically, with DeAndre Hopkins. I've spoke about Hopkins in the past. They faced him out of the offense with the Chiefs. He looked really solid before he eventually was just not given any targets. They got Hollywood Brown back. They were using Xavier Worthy just ridiculously towards the second half of the season. And I do think that, Hopkins is a solid player still. He did end up with 639 yards and 6 touchdowns this past season. I would take that from a WR2. And he was phased out the last 4 games of the year and in the playoffs too. So, I do think for the most part, this is still a piece that can be valuable for a team like the Giants and someone that Aaron Rodgers probably will respect. DeAndre Hopkins, it's well documented how much of an impact he had on Xavier Worthy as a mentor. I'd love Neighbors to have a player like this. There's still a lot for Neighbors to learn. Hopkins has one of the best release packages the league has ever seen. Let him learn from a guy like this. I think this in this instance is very good for the mentorship, and obviously he can be a WR2 for you. He can be a security blanket for whether it's Rodgers or Cam Ward. 1 year deal, $10 million, $8 million guaranteed. You have $7.3 million in cap space. You have your quarterback. You have a receiver. Yeah, he's not that good. I get it, but I have other ways I'm trying to spend this money. And I do think the Giants next year's draft, this year's draft can still allocate draft capital towards key positions like receiver, defensive tackle. We'll get there along the way. But now after the Hopkins signing, we're at $7.3 million in remaining cap space. I'm restructuring Dexter Lawrence and Andrew Thomas. $22 million in added cap space there. We're at $29.3 million. So we're still above the cap by a significant amount. And we haven't restructured Brian Burns. And I don't want to restructure Brian Burns. I want to hold off on that until the future. Like, if you have to, sure, yes, do it. But I'd rather wait until the future where we have that little bit of extra money. Like, we have the ability to restructure it if we need to. I don't really think we need to just yet, though. So right off the bat here, I'm going to sign a CB1. Really, I would say he's probably a CB2, but he was an all-pro this past season. I feel like the Giants, we've heard some rumors that they like him and Byron Murphy out of the Vikings. 3 years, 51 mil, 35 mil guaranteed. The cap hits go like this: 10 mil 2025, 20.5 mil cap hits in 2026 and 2027. I do think that Murphy is a very good player and he's a leader and he's someone that's going to make your defense a lot better, right? 27 years old. He's very, very young. Now he gave up 779 yards this past season in total, did have 6 interceptions though, 5 pass breakups and 4 touchdowns allowed. He's an aggressive cornerback. He's kind of what you want Deonte Banks to be, but we think that, Banks is a better athlete. I want Banks to be this aggressive, like Byron Murphy. He's going to create turnovers for you. He's going to be an aggressive player. And he had some really, really good games. They targeted him a lot at times this past season, certain teams. And obviously he was going up against the top guys. I don't think that Banks can handle that. Now, I do like DJ Reed as well. I like Charvarius Ward. I think that Reed would be my preference, but he's also almost 30 years old. So I think the Giants want to go younger and more long-term because Reed will hit a wall soon, most likely at his age. So Murphy, 3 years, he expires. His contract expires after that 3rd season. They could even build an out after the 2nd year if they wanted to. But a 3-year contract, it expires when he's 30. I feel like that's pretty good practice for a team that wants to stay young. And the cap hits are not bad. 20.5 mil cap hit, 2026, 2027. It's a job in the bucket. If you have Cam Ward on a rookie contract, like, guys, even if this happens, even if he doesn't play altogether that well, you'll have enough money to sign another cornerback anyway. So, long term, I don't think this is a bad decision. Byron Murphy is an aggressive cornerback. He's going to bring a playoff caliber, all pro type corner to your equation. I think that he's going to elevate the secondary significantly because they need a leader, and he's one of those guys that can be a leader on defense. So now we have $19.3 million in remaining cap space for the Giants to utilize. And now I'm going to the guard position. I like Will Fries on a 3-year, $42 million deal, $30 million guaranteed, $10 million cap hit in 2025, $16 million in 2026 and 2027. Similar to John Runyon last year, they go after a guy like Will Fries because he's really, really, really young and 26 years old, almost 27, former 7th-round pick out of Penn State. He put together a really good year before he got hurt in 2024. I think that contract will age very well, and his position specifically is right guard. Over 268 snaps last year. He was one of the best run blockers in the league, and he was showing great upside as a pass protector as well because of the injury. I think we might actually get him at a bargain here. So I think Will Fries is someone I'm looking at. That contract is in line. You're actually paying under what guards are getting paid these days, and the value that he might be able to bring you long term, it's worth the risk for me because this guard market is a little bit weird. I know Anthony has a different player in mind here, but I think that just because he's played right guard specifically, I like this player. I like Will Fries, and you can really spread the cap hits out to be pretty favorable long term. I also would re-sign Greg Van Roten to a minimum deal just to be a good depth piece. Now we have $9.3 million in remaining cap space. The next move I'm making is not going to impact this year's cap, but I'm extending Jermaine Illuminor for one more season, 2 years, $14 million, same exact price tag as he was before. $7 million. He is a very good player. He is a leader. I freaking love Jermaine Illuminor. He deserves to be here for another season. So I am extending him for another year, 2025, 2026. He's under contract for the Giants. Now, defensive tackle, I'm not going to allocate money towards in free agency because this is such a strong draft class that I think that we can find a really good starting player on day one from a 2nd or 3rd round pick, depending on, obviously we don't have a 3rd round pick because of I traded it to the Titans, but in the 2nd round, there are some really good players to find there at defensive tackle. And I think they will ultimately be BPA anyway. So that's where I would be going in the 2nd round with the defensive tackle position. Now, the last piece of the puzzle that I have here is I'm signing safety Julian Blackmon, which I know Anthony also did. 3 years, $21 million, $3 million cap hit in 2025, $9 million cap hit 2026 and 27. That leaves $6.3 million in available cap space, which I will not be spending. I'll be leaving that for emergencies and obviously filling out the rest of the roster with other pieces on the undrafted free agent market. So that's kind of how I would round it out. Julian Blackmon, and a lot of you guys loved him in our comment section, so I did some more research, and I like him a lot too. He's been inconsistent at times, but he's had some really good games. He's a solid coverage safety. He, in terms of run defense, he was really good the first couple of years in Indianapolis. He's been a little bit worse since transitioning to a full-time starter, but I know they've changed their scheme a bit. So there's a lot to like about this player. He had a 7.4% missed tackle rate in 2023, and that ballooned to 15.2% this past year. So something happened with him. And I think that the Giants, if they can get him right, he could be a really good steal for them at that price tag. He had 72 tackles in 2023 and 70 in 2024. He only gave up 252 yards. He had 2 touchdowns allowed, 3 interceptions, and a pass breakup this past season. So, you're getting what you're paying for here. You're not overpaying at safety. Now, this is a free safety for the most part. He also had 170 in the box. But I actually like Tyler Nubin playing the run a lot this past season. I wonder if the Giants would put Blackmon at free safety and then Tyler Nubin at strong safety because of his abilities in the run game, or they'd kind of just balance it out, see how they go along with, who wins those jobs and how things play out over the course of the season. But Blackmon's only 26. As you can see here, guys, aside from Hopkins and aside from Aaron Rodgers, I went really young with the rest of my selections here. Byron Murphy, Julian Blackmon, and Will Fries, all very young and very much in their prime. So those 2 guys on offense are really just to help cement this unit, to really give it some experience, a jolt of leadership and experience there. And the defense being a young up-and-coming unit that can really materialize as Cam Ward is growing into his own, and the Giants have future draft capital, first-round picks, and money to invest in reinforcing the units around him. So I do think this is a really, really good strategy to prepare the Giants for long-term sustainable success, keeping the team young, keeping available salary cap very healthy, and ultimately having a successful future. So I do think this is a really solid strategy to achieve those things, but absolutely excited to hear your take on my strategy and obviously Anthony's strategy as well in the rest of the episode.
All right, so now that we've given you guys our individual play-by-play blueprints for the New York Giants offseason, we're going to go ahead and discuss them with one another, kind of go through the similarities and differences, and just have a conversation about what we like, maybe what we don't like about each other's plans. Now, Alex, our plans were a little bit different. I had the full 7-round mock draft in there. Yours was a little bit more focused on free agency and salary cap breakdowns. You extended some players, you cut some players. I didn't do any releases. So walk me through the logic of how you got your players under the salary cap. Because again, I know you had a real focus on salary cap in your detailed plan. So how did you get to where you got with some of these players and restructurings and otherwise?
Yeah, I mean, I only restructured Dexter Lawrence and Andrew Thomas. I cut Graham Gano, Josh Azidu, and Raheem Nunez-Roche. So that opened up enough money for me to make some nice additions to this team. I went with 3 younger guys in free agency and then 2 older guys on offense. So I went with Aaron Rodgers, obviously 1-year, $30 million deal. I thought that that was a pretty fair contract for him to make him stay here in New York and not go somewhere else. But also, I don't really put too much stock in the mentorship necessarily of Cam Ward and Rodgers. I really just want someone to give this offense a jolt of like, all right, like this is what competent quarterbacking looks like. And then Cam Ward to assume that job after watching how Rodgers holds himself accountable and how, he commands an offense and the confidence that he has in that offense. Like those are things I do think rub off. And I do think that Ward, I want him to learn the cadences, everything, the terminology, everything in the offense before stepping on the field. I want him to feel like he knows like the back of his hand. He feels confident before he ever takes a snap in the NFL. So that's kind of why I believe that you could be competent with Rodgers. And then, Rodgers loves Malik Neighbors. And then Cam Ward can assume that role down the stretch. I got DeAndre Hopkins on a 1-year, $10 million deal. I think that Hopkins was pretty good last year. The Chiefs just phased him out. Like a lot of people are like, he's washed, he's bad. Like he was doing really good stuff for the Chiefs before they basically got Hollywood Brown back. And then they just focused on Xavier Worthy the entire time. And then, obviously Kareem Hunt had a pretty good end of the year too. So, I do think that Hopkins has a little bit of juice left, and I want him to be a security blanket for a guy like Rodgers and maybe even Cam Ward if he plays any football in 2025. Rodgers, like, you're not going to get Devontae Adams. He wants to go west. He wants more money. He wants to be for a winner. Hopkins is the next best option in terms of like he's older, but Rodgers is going to be able to look at Hopkins and say, if worse comes to worse, this guy has got amazing hands. And he's always going to be open when I need him to be because he's savvy, he's experienced, and he has one of the best release packages in the history of the sport. So I think Neighbors, not to mention, has a lot to learn from a guy like Hopkins too. Talk about mentorship. It's very, very well documented. And Anthony, you've talked about it before. Xavier Worthy benefited tremendously from Hopkins being in that room. I think Neighbors, having a guy like that, future potential Hall of Fame receiver, alongside him, has a lot to gain from a player like that. So I have Hopkins in that instance. Then the last piece of the offense that I did sign was Will Fries at right guard. He's a true and tried right guard. I think that that's why I liked him so much. He is coming in at a pretty reasonable cost for me. And I think that he could really outplay that contract that I gave him. He was really good before the injury. He looked like a tremendous run blocker. Pass protection was improving, and then he got hurt. So I'm signing him to a contract that reflects, you're not top of the line offensive guard, but you could get there in terms of why we're committing this level of money to you. Like you could be that good. And he has every rep in his career at right guard, which I think is valuable to me. And he has a couple years of experience, obviously, and a lot of action under his belt, just over 2,000 snaps. So it was worthwhile for me to invest. The guy is also just about to turn 27, really, really young. So I liked him there. And then on defense, I went with Byron Murphy, who's also 27 years old. DJ Reed's a bit older. Shavarius Ward, he's a good player coming off a down year. So, he could be someone the Giants look at as well. But I like Murphy because he is super aggressive, just went to the playoffs, had 5 or 6 interceptions last season. He gave up a lot of yards, but he's going to demand a lot of leadership and discipline in that secondary. And I think the Giants could get a lot out of a player like that. So I do think like the Vikings got into a lot of shootouts last season. And I think that was a total, defensive issue on their part, but the first half of the year, they were electric. Like they were locked down. And I think Byron Murphy was he a first team all pro this past year, a first team pro bowler. Like this is a guy that is going to be highly coveted, and he's very young. So when that contract expires, you are able to move on. He's only 30 years old, right? Like that's that's a good thing. Like DJ Reed on a 3-year deal is going to be 32 when it expires. So I like him getting better over time and DJ Reed probably getting worse over time, which is why I went with Murphy in this instance. Obviously, you guys can have your preferences. And the last piece of the puzzle for me, Julian Blackmon, which we agree on, would be a pretty good, solid signing. He has a lot of experience at free safety. Tyler Nubin was excellent against the run last year. I wonder if they end up putting him more in like of a strong safety, like run stopping role. And then Blackmon can be more of a free safety ball hawk. So I think we were in line with that one there for sure.
Yeah, that's actually exactly what I said was, have him play more of a box safety role, Tyler Nubin, and let Julian Blackmon just be this kind of rangy free safety. And I think it's very interesting. We attacked the offseason and the free agency period very similarly, but with all different players across the boards. Like we've talked about all of these guys on the channel. Talked about Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers, and we've talked about Will Fries and Tevin Jenkins. We've talked about Byron Murphy Jr. and DJ Reed, but we ended up picking the exact opposite of one another. And for clarity's sake, for everybody watching, that's by accident. Like we weren't collaborating while we were doing our individual plans. We both went off on our own individually, made our plans, came back together, and we're like, damn, these are like completely different from one another. The only constant being that we both had the same idea on the types of players, and we both made a trade for the number 1 overall pick. So, and obviously to draft quarterback Cam Ward. But I will say this about your plan, Alex. Byron Murphy Jr., I obviously considered him. He just scares me a little bit. I feel like he's a little bit less proven than a guy like DJ Reed. And I think DJ Reed's leadership qualities, that's why I really like him. I will say, though, your opinion on Will Fries is very interesting because I went the totally different route. We both went for youth on the offensive line, which I think is important. But for you really emphasize playing one position. For me, I emphasize playing multiple positions. I actually saw the value in Tevin Jenkins and his potential versatility. So I thought that was interesting. And then at the quarterback position, it's kind of like pick your poison. You go with Aaron Rodgers, I go with Russell Wilson. We sign them to the same contracts, which is funny enough. And then I think our big key difference here is the amount of emphasis that you place on the wide receiver position. You made it a focal point to bring in a veteran wideout. I didn't. I only brought in Michael Williams towards the tail end of my signings. I just felt like reinforcing the trenches and getting a quarterback and a veteran corner. Those were such important moves for the Giants to make, so I prioritized those. But generally speaking, our roster building strategy ended up being pretty similar. Different players at each of these positions, but very similar signings across the board. And I will say I really like that you had an extension in there for Jermaine Illuminar. I had an extension in there for Micah McFadden. I think that he's a young player that the Giants should get signed sooner rather than later. But bringing in Jermaine Illuminar on a fresh new contract does make a ton of sense. So last thing that I want you to walk me through in our compare and contrast here. So I ended up in my mock trade for the number 1 pick, giving up this year's 3rd and next year's 2nd. Yours was a little bit different. You included a player in there. So walk me through the logic behind your mock trade for the number 1 overall pick before we wrap up our discussion and kind of talk about what we think our separate free agency plans would do in terms of setting the Giants up for the draft properly.
Yeah, I mean, going up to get the number 1 overall pick for me is about longevity and sustained success. I think that Cam Ward is the best quarterback in this class by far. I think that he is worth trading a 2nd, a 3rd for, because he's got some traits that I do think are elite. And I wouldn't do it if I didn't think that. So, I think his pocket presence is elite. Like people say he has a live arm. I agree with that. I think that he's very reactive. Like he can sling it on the blink of an eye and he can make very, very accurate and powerful throws on the move. You need that in today's NFL. You can't let a ball hang up in the air for 3, 4, 5 seconds in the NFL these days. Like the DBs are too fast. They're too quick. You need to have velocity behind your throws. And Cam Ward is, and you've pointed out in the film sessions we've done, has great torque from his hips. And I think that that's really what separates him for me, is that when he's on the move and even in the pocket, the guy generates a tremendous amount of strength from his hips. And when he's able to do that on the run and he's able to flip his hips and throw across his body, I mean, yeah, some of those throws you don't want him to make, but when he's rolling out to his left, you've probably seen the throw I'm talking about. He's rolling out to the left and he flips his hips and he slings this ball to the back end of the end zone, 35 yards away on a dime. Like you don't see that very often. And his throwing technique with little sidearm, I actually like it because it allows him to be a lot more adept to throwing screen passes, getting around pass rushers and stuff like that. So I don't hate it at all. I think he can use it strategically to make it actually more beneficial. So I think that Cam Ward is really, not just the player, it's the financial flexibility you gain from drafting him, is that from Joe Shane's perspective, you need to draft a quarterback. Like, you don't have a choice. It is the only thing that is going to stop John Mara from firing him next year. If he does not draft a quarterback and the Giants struggle, it is going to be so easy for John Mara to fire Joe Shane next year. Like, so easy, because you can turn the page, you have some elite pieces, you have a ton of money, and your new regime gets to draft a quarterback. So if you're Joe Shane, it is in your best interest to go get a quarterback right now. And ideally one that's going to be long-term successful, so that he can be the GM of the Giants for much longer than we might foresee right now. So that's kind of why I'm moving up to get Cam Ward, in the context of like, yeah, I think he's worth it, but I also think Joe Shane needs to go get a player like this.
I do totally agree with you. The only, alternate reality that we can look at, though, like we kind of did this practice and simulation under the guise of we are Joe Shane. But what if we did it under the guise of we fired Joe Shane and now we were in the general manager chair? Then I think it gets really interesting, because like you said, Joe Shane has to draft a quarterback in order to save his job. But if Joe Shane was fired and we were the GMs and we were doing this from our own perspective, we wouldn't have to draft a quarterback. So it is interesting if we went under that mindset and from that perspective, I perhaps wouldn't have ended up trading up to draft a quarterback. I might have gone a different path here. Now, everybody knows how much I love Cam Ward, and that's why I'm excited. In my simulation, I was able to land him via a trade up. But you know what? If we were walking through it in a different perspective, where Joe Shane's just completely out of the picture and we are running the show, Travis Hunter totally would have tempted me with the number 3 overall pick. That's for sure. But maybe we'll do that in a different simulation another time, and we'll continue to take a look and, break down the team from all these different angles. But once again, I found this to be a really fun exercise, going through step by step and doing our own separate blueprints. I think it's pretty fascinating. As much as we talk on the channel, Alex, and as many times as we throw out all these different ideas, we independently went, worked out our own blueprints, came back, and they were rather different from one another, which I thought was really funny and pretty exciting. So some good stuff here. Hope that everybody enjoyed this exercise of going through and giving our blueprints. Once again, this was a highly requested video, so we wanted to make sure that we carved out the time to go through and get this thing done. Alex, any closing thoughts for the viewers and the listeners of Fireside Giants here as we round out our breakdowns?
I mean, listen, I want to hear your perspectives as well. Obviously, next year is going to be a crazy week, so we're going to be, I'm sure, recording all the time and getting you guys the latest and greatest on the moves that we're making. I expect the Giants to be very aggressive coming out of free agency. They have money to spend. They have future cap space. They need to upgrade this team, and I don't think they're going to wait around to do it. So, lots to happen. Wanted to get our takes and our perspectives on how they can really build out this roster quickly with the context of current media kind of and social media narratives and reports and analysis. So we're trying to incorporate all those things into our opinions here, and not just what we want, but also what players want to be here. So I think that does make a big difference in kind of how we structure this entire equation. But, Giants are going to have to throw some money around, and ultimately that quarterback should probably be the first thing off the board.
Absolutely agreed. And I'm going to bust my ass to get this thing edited, look all nice and fancy and pretty, and throw it out there as soon as possible on the YouTube, because I really think, Alex, if a trade does happen for the number 1 overall pick, it's going to be a lot sooner than people think. It has to get done, in my opinion, before the legal tampering period, so the Giants can go into free agency with a plan in place. So I think it's going to be a really interesting next few days. For what it's worth, I think that's why the Titans had Abdul Carter, Cam Ward, Travis Hunter, all these guys in the building prior to the legal tampering period. I think so that was so that they could make a decision and potentially trade the pick or decide if they're going to be taking a quarterback number 1. So it's going to be a really interesting weekend as certain things kind of fall into place here. And we're going to get this up ASAP, and then we're going to go ahead and continue to break down what actually takes place when the legal tampering period starts on Monday, with live streams and videos and all that other fun content that you guys are looking forward to right here on Fireside Giants. So subscribe if you're new, ring the bell so you don't miss an episode. Comment your thoughts down below in the comment section. We want to see your blueprints and all of your thoughts on our blueprints down below in the comment section. If you listen to Apple or Spotify, make sure to leave us a 5-star review. Go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. Without further ado, I'll catch you on the next one. Have a good one, and let's go Giants.
Perfect.